Hey there, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. This is now our fifth video in our series looking at content from Chapter 8. You may notice I've got this new backdrop in back of me, and very happy to have that. I know that it may be a little less distracting than seeing all of the printer and other stuff that's behind me. So let's climb into content from Chapter 8, and in this fifth video what we're looking at is, as you can see here, the psychological contract and job fit. So let's climb into this content. When we talk about this whole topic of job fit, one of the first things that the textbook introduces is this whole concept of the psychological contract. What is the psychological contract? Well, first of all, it's not a written contract. It's rather an unspoken, tacit set of expectations held by an employee concerning what he or she will contribute to an organization, which we refer to as the contributions, and what the organization will in return provide the employee, referred to as inducements. And so it is this understanding, the set of expectations that an employee has, that if I offer my contributions, the employer will provide these sets of inducements. And it should be said at this point that the psychological contract, in other words, the set of expectations, is true when a person joins any kind of an organization, whether or not it's a for-profit employer or whether it's a bowling team, when an athlete joins a sports team, when you join a book club. Typically, a person has a set of expectations in terms of what they're going to contribute or what they're going to provide, and then what they expect to be delivered, what the bonus or the value is, the reward for being part of the organization. This is certainly true when we talk about the employment engagement. So what are the sorts of contributions and inducements that are typically expected in a psychological contract with regard to an employment situation? Well, you can see from this next slide, here is a short list, and these are not comprehensive. These are just examples, of course, of what an individual and an employer expect in this contract, this unspoken set of expectations from both sides. Contributions from the individual, well, let's be honest. The organization expects you to provide your best effort, to use all of the abilities and talents that you said you had on your resume during the interview, for you to remain loyal to the organization throughout your employment with that organization, for you to use all of your skills, for you to give the best of your time, and for you to be highly competent in the role to which you are provided. In turn, as you can see there, what we are expecting as employees when we join an organization, what we expect is not only a paycheck, you see there in the list of inducements, but also some set of benefits that were agreed upon at the point of employment. We expect a reasonable degree of job security for us to take this role. And alongside that goes a whole bundle of other less concrete benefits, like status of having a particular role in a job in an organization that you can tell your friends about, or future opportunities for promotion and advancement, as well as future career opportunities that will accrue over time. And this is then the set of normal expectations that an employee brings to an organization and that an organization expects of an employee at the point of hire. But a question becomes, is this really what happens in reality? And of course, we are all aware of examples where this is not necessarily 100% true, right? So for instance, we're aware of situations where, well, as I've mentioned in class before, right, that 2/3, 66% of employees in America fess up to abusing the sick leave provision given by their employer, right? They will call in sick. Sorry, I've got this really scratchy throat. Whereas really what they're planning to do is go off on vacation, spend the weekend over in Cabo or something like that, right? So we know from that list that you see here that we don't always give the very best of our time to an employer. And of course, on the flip side, we also realize and we know examples where the employer really isn't providing the level of job security that you would hope. I know of an example I heard of this very day today of a local employer here in the East Bay that because they're going a little slow these days, especially with the shelter-in-place order, they're looking right now, today, to start laying off staff. Now, of all times. They don't have to, they're not forced to, it's just something they're going to do. One of the worst rat stories I've heard today, and of course there's an example of their employees are expecting a certain set of inducements from the organization like job security, and unfortunately some of them are about to find out their expectations were misplaced. What we sometimes find then is that while we hope for the best in terms of longevity at the job, and what we're really looking for is over time for a great, perfect, complementary fit between what a person brings to the role and what the job really demands. As you see here on this slide, the extent to which a person's contributions and the organization's inducements match one another, we're hoping to see over time a great person-job fit. However, you and I both know of examples where that's not really the case. Well, over time, what has happened is clearly this person and this role do not match. And as a result, that person is miserable, the organization is miserable, and quite frankly, the customers and clients that are touched by this poor person-job fit, they're miserable as well. Now, what are some reasons that we can think of why this poor person-job fit happens? Well, this is not necessarily content from the textbook, but I thought I might give it to you in the next slide. Some reasons for poor person-job fit. Well, you can see there. It could be, from the very beginning, an imperfect organizational selection procedure. In other words, the organization itself was vague or foggy about what they needed, or did a poor job communicating to candidates what they were really looking for, and so from the very beginning, it was a very imperfect fit. Point number two, it could be simply that people change, and you know this to be true. People change and grow. People who start out perhaps passionate and invigorated about the job, they get tired out, they get bored, they get lazy, they stop bringing their very best to the organization. Or, quite frankly, it could be large-scale changes in the organization itself brought about over time, perhaps simply because the competitive landscape has changed or divisions and departments have been moved around. And so on both sides, people and organizations are dynamic living organisms and can change over time. And what was once a good person-job fit becomes something less than that over time. Sometimes new technologies require new employee skills that, quite frankly, that particular person just doesn't have. I'll be perfectly honest, this is something that we're seeing right now today, when every teacher, every instructor in the United States, quite frankly, is probably been forced within the span of 1 week to begin teaching online, 100% online, in places where they have shelter-in-place orders, like here in the state of California. What does that mean? It means that teachers who may be perfectly competent at their job and have been teaching for decades, but really, quite frankly, aren't great with technology, all of a sudden they're faced with brand new challenges that they may or may not be able to conquer in a very short amount of time. Sometimes new technology comes in and, well, changes the landscape of what is a good person-job fit. Next on the list, unique individuals and unique jobs. Well, that can be a euphemism, right? That you are really unique, you're really special. You're just so special that you don't really fit any role this company has. Or it could simply be that truly people with your unique sets or a unique cocktail of idiosyncrasies just doesn't work out in that particular role there. Someone perhaps with very, very difficult people skills, who are very, very awkward with people, and they're placed and thrust into a role where they have to constantly interact with customers, perhaps disgruntled or irate customers. that's probably a very, very poor person-job fit. And those are just some of the reasons why the person-job fit can sometimes go sideways. You see there on the slide then, there's also the very nature of individual differences, that people have personal attributes that vary from one person to another, physical, psychological, emotional, and that on some aspect, on some axis or dimension, someone may be a good fit for a job, but it just ends up that perhaps emotionally or psychologically, despite the fact they're physically able to do the job, they're not a great fit for any other sort of some whole host of different reasons. And the impact of individual differences can vary greatly with organizational circumstances and contexts. Things change over time. Things have changed dramatically for most businesses here in the United States within the last 2 weeks. And as a result, the impact of people's individual differences, well, they really can make what once was a great person-job fit something less than very quickly. What is a way forward in all of this for us? Well, some possible solutions, as you see there on the screen, that organizations may want to start with better, more precise job descriptions to begin with. I still see examples in classified job postings that are very imprecise or very vague or very nebulous on certain aspects of what they're looking for. And it could be simply the organization hasn't done a good job of defining that for themselves, much less to potential candidates and interested prospects. Very tightly tied to that, you see there on the screen, perhaps organizations need to do a better job in the interview and candidating and hiring process. Now, generally speaking, organizations have caught wind and are wise to this. And so for many of us, we're aware when we go up for a job interview, we may be starting out on a series of 5 or 6 or 7 or more interviews, face-to-face, video, group interviews, all sorts of things that happen now to try and better screen candidates in the process. We've done a pretty good job of that, generally speaking, as employers here in the United States, but there's always room to get better and room to grow. My own interview process here at the College of Marin, for instance, comprised several different interviews. There was a phone interview, there was a video interview, there was a teaching demonstration, there was a face-to-face aspect, and there were several different dimensions of me candidating for this very role here. And so I think that this is one example of organizations doing a better job than they used to in trying to extend and provide multiple viewpoints of a candidate in order to do a better job of trying to ascertain person-job fit and not make a hiring error. Finally, another possible solution may be to instill more horizontal mobility. And what I mean by horizontal mobility is that when an organization discovers, hey, it may be that the person-job fit here is just not working for either us or the person, rather than looking at that as simply an opportunity to replace, to upgrade, to make another hire, is there a way perhaps to redeem this hiring decision by moving the person to another role within the organization that they may be a better fit for? To try to make that kind of a decision, or at least that kind of an option, sooner in the equation when you recognize this is perhaps not the best person-job fit, to find another role for them, and therefore to save the organization and the person the kind of large-scale change that happens when you have to replace someone or rehire. And that's really, I think, where we want to end this particular short discussion on person-job fit. Why is it necessary to take this into account? Because when an organization makes an error in hiring the wrong person for a particular role, it is incredibly costly. Because remember, the organization loses a number of things, not just paid salary to someone who didn't work out. There is training costs, there are deployment and onboarding costs, there are all sorts of costs that are involved in hiring the wrong person. Once you make someone leave the organization, you have to batten up your security and your network and all sorts of things, much less probably the largest cost that happens when you make a wrong hire. Opportunity cost. you probably left another candidate on the table that you should have hired, and now you have to go back and you've lost time and resources, and that may be the biggest real hidden cost of making a bad hire decision, opportunity cost that's lost. So this is important stuff that we need to take seriously. Hopefully this begins our discussion on selecting and finding the right person for the job to make an excellent decision that provides great person-job fit. Thanks so much for your attention in this video. We'll see you in the next lecture.